there, my Zaniacs! Today I'm putting together through pictures what I put into my most recent soup. This is a very low carb soup that even my husband is enjoying. I wasn't sure when I was making it, since I really just kept throwing stuff that I felt would go well together, if it would be video worthy, and at the time I didn't even think to bring out my camera, so apologies for that. I should and will next time, but I should have. Also, a quick disclaimer here, most of these photos have been pulled from Google searches since the ones I used are already in my soup. However, it has been requested of me to bring forth the recipe, so here I am. Some of these steps are a bit wordy, but I like to try to help people who may be new to cooking. If you have any questions about this process, please feel free to comment below. I'm always happy to help where I can. Keep in mind that every time I set my timer, I put that lid back onto the crock pot. I'm not cooking soup with an open crock pot. I have the lid. This soup starts off a lot like my video for October stew. However, instead of beef stock, I have chosen to try, since it's been spoken of by family for so long, bone broth. This picture I'm using is not the same brand nor flavoring. There was one I found that was for chicken, beef, and pork. So a pretty open to use beef broth there. Yeah, pretty generic, but I found it was organic, and hey, they were 2 for $7. I bought the 2 and poured them into my crock pot. It was at this point I turned my crock pot on high, allowed the broth to start heating up, and I went to start working with the meat that I bought. This time, compared to my other stew video, I was actually able to find a decent sized rump roast. I cut the meat into sections down to the large slab of fat that was at the bottom, and I left that part alone. That way it stayed still one piece and fanned out a bit into the crock pot to allow a more even cook. This process would take a while. The cooking process would take a while, not the cutting. Just making sure there's clarification there. Okay. I added some salt and pepper and turned to my usual method of keeping time. At this point, I kept setting my microwave timer for 1 hour. Getting up to check on it, flip the meat over each time. As soon as that meat was easily pulled away from the large fat piece holding them all together, is when my next step began. Yes, this took a good few hours, to say the least. After I had pulled the meat fat out to throw it away, I added cauliflower rice, as this would be the second part that would need a bit of time to cook. Now, I'm assuming, if you would like more carbs, you can add regular uncooked rice, not the minute rice, just uncooked rice. But I chose cauliflower for this one. I found the bag in the refrigerated section at the grocery store by the fresh fruits and veggies. This was still raw, not one of those freezer bags you can steam in the microwave. I poured in the whole bag. It wasn't too big, it was about the size you see here in this picture. I'm not even positive if this was the same brand or not. I actually didn't pay that much attention to the bag itself. I just knew it was cauliflower rice. Yeah, I'm happy that I can know where to find it again, though. I'm really pleased with how it turned out here. I set the timer this time again for another hour to let it get a good start on cooking, though. After that hour was up, I added a bag of freezer can steam in the bag broccoli florets. I did not choose to steam them in the bag this time, however. I broke the pieces apart in the bag, as they tell you to do even before you cook in the microwave. Snipped off the top of the bag and just poured them directly into the crock pot. At this point, I began to take 2 forks to start pulling the meat into smaller chunks. The cauliflower was still in need of more cooking, and now I had frozen broccoli added in. I set my timer again for another hour. Once my timer went off, it was time for me to add some more fresh ingredients. In this soup, I had chosen to add chopped shallot and 2 chopped tomatoes, bought on the vine. I rinsed them all off because habit and all. I grabbed my chopping board. I peeled off that outer skin of the shallot and chopped into small pieces. Well, going through that regular process of tearing up, fun times. Yeah, I cry cutting onions, who doesn't, right? I then cut both tomatoes into 4 pieces, removed the inner goopy seed part, tossing that away. I'm sure if you'd like to have it, that's your choice. I don't like that part unless eating a raw tomato myself. I then cut each of those into 3 strips to chop into bite-sized pieces. All of the chopped shallot and tomatoes went directly into the crock pot. At this point, my cauliflower was beginning to soften and the broccoli was edible, however, still a bit cold in the middle. It was at this point I decided to down the temperature of my crock pot to low setting to complete this soup. I worked with pulling apart the meat a bit more and set my timer for another 45 minutes. Guys, the apartment smelled oh so good. I was super excited when the timer rang for me to check again. I began adding spices. I put in a lot, actually. That small bit of salt and pepper I added at the beginning had been overpowered with all I had put in. Each of these seasonings got a good shake into my soup. I went across lengthwise with all of them, gave my soup a good stirring, made sure to take a taste. Oh, so good. Still tasted like it needed a bit more salt, but I needed to give these seasonings time to take over. I set my timer for another half an hour and sat back down, mostly on my hands. Disclaimer here, I know it does seem awkward to put hot sauce into a soup, but interestingly enough, it brought the flavor out more for me for those tomatoes. It's a good thing for me to remember. When the time had arrived, yes, it was more salty, but still needed a pinch more. I added a few more drops of the soy sauce, gave my salt container a couple small shakes in. At this point, I cut off my crock pot, let it sit in its own warmth. The lid's still on, of course. You know, it was gonna take at least a good little while for the crock pot itself, not the inner pot of it, but the surrounding part that heats it. It's gonna take a little while for that to cool down anyway, so it was a good time. I still have one ingredient to add though. Bacon. I cooked up 6 pieces in my oven, as I did not wish to add raw meat to what was already so great. I made sure that they were more crisp than chewy. Once out of the oven, I put on a paper towel and blotted them dry with another paper towel. I left these strips to cool for a good 10 minutes because I didn't want to burn my hands before breaking them up into pieces to add to the soup. I gave my soup a good stir, let it sit for another 15 minutes, trying to allow the bacon some time to add its flavor to the mix. So there we have it. The soup I spent practically the whole day making. You guys, I'm thrilled with how this soup turned out. And if you decide to make this for yourself, I would love to hear your feedback. You know, I don't know if there's any recipes out there for this particular soup. I just wing it. As stated at the beginning of this video, I'm happy to answer any questions relevant to what I've shown you. I love to help where I can. You all have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching. Bye, everyone.